Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us. This is Community Church Online. Well, this Sunday is January 3rd, 2021. It is almost exactly 1 year since our launch date of January 5, 2020. It's our first birthday. Thank you so much for watching. If you are watching for the first time, if you're just checking us out, please head over to communitychurch.net/connect. There's a form, you fill that out, and we will send you a gift card for some coffee in the mail. Every week we have programs online for preschoolers, elementary age, and preteen kids. And if you want to check those out, go to communitychurch.net/media. Everything that we have done over this last year as a church, everything that we continue to get to do as a church is made possible by the generous donations by a lot of different people. If you'd like to do your giving online, head over to communitychurch.net/give, but please don't feel any pressure or obligation to give. It's a new year. It's a great time to start new things, new habits, and we'd love for you to join one of our community groups. Be on the lookout for a video announcement about that next week. Well, that's it for me. Happy New Year. I really hope you enjoyed this service.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me.
There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me.
There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Well, thanks for joining us this week. If you're new, you've picked a great time to start tuning in with us. One, because it's the week of our first birthday, which is exciting, right? I mean, we started last year on January 5th of 2020, and that was, an interesting time to start a church. We've learned a lot from 2020, but we are ready to leave 2020 behind us, I think, like everybody else. But also, it's a brand new year. Everybody loves a new year because it's a great time to start trying new things. And so you picked a great week to tune in with us. Speaking of that, New Year's. People love New Year's. Why? Because it's a blank slate, right? It's like a fresh canvas. It's a blank, clean white t-shirt or like a fresh pair of socks. Fun fact about me, if I ever win the lottery, I'm going to buy a new pair of socks for myself every single day because there's nothing better than putting on a new pair of socks, like that fresh, clean feeling. It's like you could do anything when you have new socks on. Anyway, people love a fresh, clean slate, and that's what's put before us right now, like at the start of a new year. It's like, okay, well, what are we gonna do here with 2021? And today, what I wanna do is ask you a question. And asking yourself questions like this, learning to think like this, implementing the principle that we're talking about today really has the ability not only to change our lives as a whole, but to change the way that we approach every single day. It has the ability to give us clarity when it comes to decision making, it has the ability to give us direction, give us a sense of purpose, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of internal satisfaction, a sense of meaning. And I promise you, if you learn to be the type of person that is constantly asking questions like this, it will change the way that you approach life in general. So ready? Here's the question. Ready? Question is, where do you want to be at this time next year? Where do you want to be in January of 2022? And how are you going to get there? I remember when I was younger, like we'd go on road trips, and my mom is like the most prepared person that you'll ever meet in your entire life, right? Like her pocketbook, it's like the Barney bag. Every time you reach into there, you never know what she's gonna pull out. You have a headache, she's got what you need. You're thirsty, boom, she's got hungry. You like everything, always ready in the bag. And no matter how prepared she was, I still hated road trips because I felt like I was in a prison cell and I always had to go to the bathroom. And so I just dreaded road trips. I love the vacation part, hated trying to get there. So I remember, like, no matter how prepared she was, I'd always be complaining in the backseat. And eventually she would just turn around and she'd say, all right, listen, just close your eyes. And when you wake up, we'll be there. And I would try it. And sometimes it didn't work, but often it did. And it was amazing. It was like time travel. You just like close your eyes, boom, open them, Hershey Park, right? Amazing. It really is like the closest thing to teleporting. But as an adult, right, this is common sense. As an adult, I learned pretty quickly when I'm driving, that doesn't work, right? You can't just close your eyes and hope that you get there. Why? Because a trip, a journey, is filled with decisions, like constantly making decisions, making sure that you stay on the road, deciding, like you hit a fork in the road. Do we go this way or do we go this way? Do we get off at this exit or do we keep on going? Are we going too fast? Are we going too slow? Do we have to reroute? Should we stop and take a break? Constantly asking decisions. And you can't just like take your hands off the wheel and close your eyes because when it comes to getting where you want to go, you will never arrive on accident. You will never arrive on accident. And so my question is, where are you right now? Where are you going? And where do you want to be at this time next year? It's a basic principle, right? Maybe I'm exhausting this metaphor a little bit, but if you think about a road trip, you and I would never get behind the wheel without knowing where we're trying to go. Why? Because when you don't know where you're going, you don't know how to get there. When you get there, or if you get there, and you know you're never gonna arrive at the place you wanna be on accident. There are too many decisions. There are too many choices to not have a destination. But here's the thing, and this is where we start to see the effects of this, right? When we know where we're going, it gives us like immediately starts to order priorities, like what's important starts to stand out. It immediately brings clarity to the confusion of big and small decisions, and it will give us a sense of like accomplishment, of real satisfaction, of measurable progress. Like when you know where you're going, you'll know if you've made a wrong turn, or if you're going too fast, or if you're going too slow, or if you need to recalculate, or if you're headed in the wrong direction. It all becomes clear when you have a destination. Now, here's the great thing about this, right? If you're somebody who doesn't go to church, like you're not into God, religion, or maybe you're still wrestling with it, or maybe you hate it and you don't want to be part of it at all, but someone's making you watch this. This, like doing this, implementing this question will be extremely helpful to you because it will give you a sense of purpose and a sense of clear direction for your life. When we're constantly asking, where are we trying to go? Like where do we want to end up? It's a really, really helpful thing. But if you're a person of faith, if you're a person who says that you follow Jesus, then doing this is essential. We believe that active faith, like a faith that's alive, is faith that's growing. Like our confidence in God is growing more and more. We believe that life change is a huge part of following Jesus. Like life change for the better. God loves us too much to keep us in like the mess that we're in. And so we are like told to make progress. If you're somebody who reads the Bible regularly, like keep your eyes peeled for this. Look for how often the writers in the New Testament talk about where they're going and where we should be going, how we should be making progress. A lot of theologians, well, most theologians would call this the process of sanctification, right? Which is a gradual transformation over time. But if you don't know where you are and where you're going, there will be no way to measure if we're making progress. So let me ask you a question. Think about like patience, your patience. Are you more patient now than you were last year? Or think about like forgiveness, right? Are you more forgiving now than you were last year? Are you more compassionate now? Has your confidence in God grown since last year? And if so, how? I'm willing to bet that it happened because you did something intentionally. If you became a more patient person, it's because you said, I need to be a more patient person and I need to do things to take steps toward that destination. It doesn't just happen. We don't just arrive on accident. And so this applies in a very general sense, like in terms of life change, but it can also apply in a very specific sense, like you personally having your own direction or destination. And for me, this is where my faith totally changed. This is where I started to look at my life differently. When my faith went from being something that like was nice, like something I should do, so I like try to get to church on Sunday, to something that like became an everyday thing that I relied on. It went from being something that was important to something that was like indispensable, something that was valuable. And we see this idea of individual direction all throughout ancient Jewish history, and also like all throughout the New Testament. In fact, I would argue that we have the New Testament because somebody was asking this question constantly. And the person I'm talking about is a guy named Paul. Paul was one of the most influential people who's ever lived, like in all of Christian history. More influential than Billy Graham, more influential than like any Christian you know. And it's because he was it's because of a lot of reasons. But one of them is because he was constantly asking this question. And here's how he articulates it. This is in a letter he wrote to a church in Rome. He says, "It has always been my ambition to preach the gospel where Christ was not known, so that I wouldn't be building on someone else's foundation." This word here for ambition, he says it's always been my ambition. It's the idea of having a service, like a job that you're honored to complete. He saw this as his individual task. There's another translation that says, where he says, I have made it my aim to preach the gospel, to tell people about Jesus where nobody's known about Jesus. The Apostle Paul, he understood his job, like his mission. Part of his purpose was to tell people about Jesus where people didn't know about Jesus. That was his individual destination, his individual direction. If you were to ask Paul, like, hey, Paul, what's your mission? He would be like, oh, it's to tell people about Jesus where people don't know about Jesus. Now, here's the cool part. This was not everybody else's mission. There's a guy named Peter. Maybe you've heard of him. He was a close friend of Jesus. He became an apostle, so to speak, someone who's sent to the Jewish people. He believed it was his job to convince Jewish people who are already religious, that Jesus was who he said he was. And so he kind of stayed with that group. The Apostle Paul is like, no, I'm going to the people who have no idea, who have not heard about him at all. That's going to be my job. He believed he was uniquely gifted, like based on his abilities and his experience and the way that he saw the world. He's like, all right, this is what I think my aim is. Like, this is my ambition. This is my job. And here's the amazing thing about it. So much of what we know about Paul, of what we know about his life, like really is because of this. Because he filtered every decision he made through his like mission, through the job that he believed that he had. And so decisions for him, like they weren't always easy, but they were clear. Because he knew what he was trying to do. He knew where he was trying to go. Like, he traveled all around the Roman Empire, all around like the known world at that time, telling people about Jesus. And if you were to ask him why, he wouldn't be like, because I love to travel. I don't really like to stay in one place. No, he was like, no, because I'm specifically going to people who have never heard. So what I have to do is keep finding people who have never heard. And then he would leave, and he would leave other people behind. Interestingly, he would also leave them behind with a destination, with a purpose. Like when he left one of his younger apprentices behind, he's like, all right, your job here is to appoint leaders. Do that. That is your destination. Set up leaders in this church. But everything he did, all the decisions that he made, they weren't always easy, but they were always clear. There were times where Paul would take the advice of people, right? But it was because of this, because it lined up with what he was trying to do. Then there were also times where he totally refused advice from people who loved him and cared about him. Why? Because he knew this doesn't line up with my destination, right? Like making a right here will not take us to where I'm trying to go right now. So thanks for the advice, but sorry, like that doesn't line up with where I'm going. He had this just like astronomically huge goal of getting before Caesar, like basically the ruler of the known world, and telling the story of Jesus in front of the largest possible audience he could have at that point. And why? Because he believed that that would be the best platform for him to accomplish what he's trying to do, to tell people about Jesus who have never heard about Jesus. It filtered all of his decisions. In fact, there were times where he willingly was put in chains, and even came to the point where he was willingly open to giving up his life because it lined up with what he was trying to do. And Paul's not the only one who does this. Like I said, Peter does this as well. Peter is a guy who goes just to the Jews because that's his job. We also see Jesus do this. Jesus told his closest followers that he came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. And so, I wonder if you know the part of the story where he's sitting down with his followers and he gets down to wash their feet. I wonder if right before that he was like, am I really going to touch those things, right? Do I really have to put my hands on those nasty, nasty toes? And maybe he stopped in that moment and thought about why he was there. It was you know what? No, I'm here to serve, and this is what's going to show them that. They'll talk about this forever if I get down and I wash their feet. There's a part of the story where they tried to make Jesus king. The people wanted to make him the ruler of the government, right? And Jesus is no, and he gets away from them. He does not let them make him king because he knew that's not why he came. It was a very, very clear decision for him. In fact, at the very, very end of his life on earth, right? He goes into the Garden of Gethsemane. We see him in his the most human side of him that we ever see, where he's praying and he just says I don't want to do this. I don't want to die. But in that moment, you can bet that it was his direction that determined his decision. He knew where he was going, and so the choice, though it was not easy, it was so clear. I heard a story not too long ago about an interview with the CEO of Southwest Airlines, and the interviewer asked him, what is it like to run Southwest Airlines? It's so big, it's so intimidating, must be so many difficult choices. And he said, actually, it's really quite easy. Our mission is to be the low-cost airline. And so that's how we make our decisions. So let me give you an example. The head of marketing walks in and says, research has shown that people would like to have chicken salad on the plane. So I ask her, will that make us the low-cost airline? She says no. And so I say, then there will be no chicken salad on the plane. When we have a clear destination, it gives us a clear sense of direction. It brings clarity to the confusion of the decision-making process, whether it's a huge life's mission like Paul had, or even if it's just some kind of goal, something that we're striving for, something that we've made our aim or our ambition, whether it's for life or for the next year or for the next month. When we know where we want to go, we'll know how to get there, and if we get there. And so my question for you is, where are you going? Where do you want to be at this time next year? It's probably worth sitting down and thinking about a mission for your life, something you want to accomplish with your life, or at least an aspect of your life. We believe that God made us a certain way. Like, there are things that I love to do simply because I love to do them. Like, I can't explain why I'm passionate about certain things and not passionate about other things. We believe that God put those passions and those desires there for a reason. We read in one of the ancient Jewish Psalms that God gives us the desires of our hearts, meaning like the things we desire are there because God put them there. I'm passionate about certain things just because I am. And you're passionate about certain things just because you are. I believe that God made you that way for a reason. And the more clearly you define your destination, like where you're trying to go, what you're trying to be, the more clear your direction will come. And here's the amazing part. It can be like big and intimidating to think about this, but even the Apostle Paul changed his direction. Like one day it became clear to him, I'm trying to do this, but now I'm doing this. He started off as somebody who was trying to be an apostle, someone who's sent to tell the Jewish people about Jesus. And then he was like, not my thing. And he's like, I'm going to the other people. And so he goes to the what they call the Gentiles, or the nations, the non-Jewish people, to tell them. And that's where he like really discovers it. Oh, I would suggest that having bad aim is better than having no aim. Like, so really think, like, how can my life, or at least an aspect of my life, have a mission, a direction? And so what does this look like, right? Like, what does it look like to have like a mission or a destination, an aim for my life, or for an aspect of my life, right? Unless you want to be an apostle to the Gentiles, we haven't really talked about specific things. So here's some examples, right? I know of a couple that said that they want their marriage to be a restorative marriage. In other words, they want people who encountered them to feel refreshed. Like, that's what they want to do. And so what has that led them to do? It's led them to make their home a place where they can make guests extremely comfortable, where like the people that come to stay with them can have a place where they can breathe and relax. And so it's given them, like when they're like, okay, what do we want our house to look like? That's the question they ask. Well, how does this help us accomplish our mission more clearly? There was a guy who was a pastor. His name was George Muller, or George Mueller. He lived in Europe, and he was around the 1800s. But like during his years of interacting with people, he realized like people don't trust God as much as they could. Like, they're really not all that confident in the things that God has said. And so that became his life's mission, to show people that God can be trusted. And so he thought, like, how can I best do this? And so in addition to running his church, he started an orphanage. And he made it very clear, I'm not starting this orphanage because I'm like particularly passionate about kids, though I do care about orphans. This isn't like the thing that drives me. The thing that drives me is the idea of starting an orphanage with very, very little resources. And so he decided like he was just going to pray for the resources to run this orphanage and not ask people for money. And the orphanage, like, there were times when things were tough, when that faith was tested, but the orphanage like made it. He established this huge orphanage, and he did it to show people that God could be trusted, because that was his mission. I know another guy who goes to our church who said, like, when he was in high school, he decided he wanted to take over his dad's business so that he could hire employees who would make enough money to live, but also have enough time to volunteer in their church, to like be part of everything that's happening in their church community. That's like taking a regular job and infusing it with a mission other than like just be successful and make money. He gave it a purpose. There's a comedian. His name is Michael Jr. He loves to make people laugh, so he became a comedian. But like a few years into his career, in light of like all the stress and pain that people go through on a regular basis, he decided that rather than try and get laughs from people, like that's what a comedian typically does, you try and get people to laugh at your jokes, he decided that he wanted to give people a reason to laugh. And so it totally changed the way he wrote his jokes. It also changed the way he did stand-up. Like, it changed literally where he did stand-up. It's not uncommon for him to go into prisons, right? To people who are obviously not having like the best lives or the best seasons of their lives, right? And he goes in there and he gives them a reason to laugh. That's taking a job and giving it a mission, a purpose. And so, like, my suggestion to you is to take some time to really think about the things that you bring to the table, the things that make you unique, your gifts, your talents, your passions, your desires, those things that you have that you just can't even explain, like why they're there. And think about what you can do with that. And maybe somewhere along the way you have to redefine or change your like overall direction, but having the wrong direction or bad aim is better than having no aim. Or maybe it's easier to think about things like on a bite size level, right? Like much smaller. Maybe you just stop and ask, where do I want to be at this time next year? Our staff just asked this question, where we looked at different areas, not only of the church, but of our lives, like our health. How much do I want to weigh next year, right? Like, what do I want my health to look like? What kind of habits do I want to break? What kind of habits do I want to add to my life? What am I going to do that's going to help my faith grow? How many times a week am I going to do it? How many times a month am I going to do it? My finances. What do I want my finances to look like? How much money do you want to have saved by this time next year? How do you want to grow as a spouse if you're married? How can you improve your marriage? How can you get your marriage to a better place by this time next year? How can you grow as a parent if you're a parent? How can you be intentional, set up like habits and routines that will bring you closer to your children now while you still have them? You don't want to get to a place where you look back and realize you never thought about where you wanted to be as a dad, or where you wanted to be as a mom, or where you wanted to be as a husband or as a wife, or the kind of teacher you wanted to be, or the kind of business person you wanted to be, or the kind, fill in the blank, like, what do you want the future to look like? If you don't know where you're going, you won't know how to get there, and you won't know if you get there. You know, one of the cool things about the Apostle Paul, he saw his mission, he often called it his race. His race. In fact, one time people were like trying to get him to stay in their town in the city of Ephesus. And he was like, no. They're like, your life's going to be in jeopardy if you leave. And he's like, no, that doesn't even mean anything to me. The only thing I'm trying to do is finish my race. Finish my race. And when he gets to the end of his life, you know what he says? He says, maybe you've heard this verse before if you're familiar with it. He says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. He got to a point where he can look back on his life and see, I was able to do what I was trying to do, because knowing where he was going gave him the ability to see if he was getting there or not. So he ended his life with this immense sense of accomplishment and was actually willing to give his life at that point because he knew he was doing what he was supposed to be doing. And so, you know, and I know, that when it comes to road trips and life's journeys, you will never arrive on accident. Without a destination, you really won't have any sense of direction. So my question for you, same question we started out with. Where are you going? And where do you want to be at this time next year?